I'm Cole Haddon, and what you're about to listen to is a bonus episode from Season 1 of 5 a.m. StoryTalk. In this podcast bonus eps, my guests break down a seminal piece of art from their lives, what I describe as mini masterclasses, although not always on the subject you expect. These bonus episodes are exclusive to my paid supporters in the season they were originally published. But in the following season, they're each unlocked, one at a time, so everyone can listen to them alongside the new episodes. Your paid subscriptions get you early access to these bonus eps, months and months early, but they also help keep the lights on here. In fact, Season 2 of this podcast enjoys several production upgrades because so many of you believe in this multimedia arts and culture conversation. I hope you consider becoming a paid supporter yourself, which you can learn more about in the show notes. Now, enjoy this 5 a.m. Story Talk bonus episode, Story Talkers. Welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk, and thanks for being a paid subscriber to this podcast or newsletter, however it is you found your way here today. I'm just glad to have you with me. As for me, I'm Cole Haddon, and I'm here again with Australian First Nations artist Blak Douglas, one of my favorite contemporary Aussie artists. We'll be discussing a seminal piece of art from his life, the 1966 Australian $1 banknote, which featured a design that stole the bark paintings of Aboriginal artist David Malangi. A unique choice to be sure, but I think you'll be surprised by how great this chat turned out. I was thrilled when Blak said he wanted to talk about it. So let's get into it. Welcome back, Blak. It's been a great conversation so far. So when we talked about you joining me on this podcast, I asked you to pick a seminal piece of artwork from your life to discuss with me, and you went with something that left me surprised, intrigued, and incredibly excited. Can you tell my listeners about it?
It's one of the first cases involving Aboriginal art that particularly appealed to me because I literally grew up with this currency, and that is the Australian $1 note, which was the first decimal currency in Australia, which took us away from pounds, shillings, and pence, a British currency that existed until 1966 in Australia. And so the $1 note came in it, and what was completely gobsmacking about the whole concept was that it featured beautiful tribal Aboriginal artwork on the note. The note itself was brown. People can Google this one, the Australian $1 note, and I'll try and put it into a nutshell, and allow your audience to do a little bit of Wikipedia on this one, and then consider these facts. Consider this scenario. That $1 note was released 1 year before the referendum in Australia. In Australia, by 1967, it was the first time a referendum was held to consider Aboriginal people as citizens of Australia. So the year that this $1 note was released, featuring the Aboriginal artwork from a tribal man from Arnhem Land, northeast Arnhem Land, at top of Northern Territory, the Eora Nation, literally the year that he made that, he was still flora and fauna, this esteemed tribal man. That means that he wasn't a human being in the eyes of Australia, in the Commonwealth of Australia. So 1967, the referendum, people can Google that one as well. Fascinating, because 90-something% of the citizens of Australia, excluding Aboriginal people, voted in favour of considering Aboriginal people citizens within the colony. And effectively what that meant was, if we go back some only 30 years prior, so 1928 in Australia was the last recorded massacre of Aboriginal people. It was the Coniston massacre in the Northern Territory, in the desert region. So that's when a whole group of people were shot by rifle fire for being Aboriginal. And so fast forward some 30 years, and this note is released. But here's the catch. The artwork was a bark painting that was exhibited in Europe, part of a Australian ethnographic expose of Aboriginal people, because peoples will come to know that the Yolngu people are one of the last bastions of tribalism today in Aboriginal culture. And so one of the most celebrated forms of Aboriginal art today and the most desired are still the form of artwork from Arnhem Land, which are primarily produced on bark from a tree bark gum tree. And the bark is removed, fashioned into a canvas, if you will. And then the ochres and the pigments from the earth are used to paint these beautiful, painstakingly detailed artworks. One of these ones was exhibited in Europe at the time. A photographer, a graphic designer, photographed that artwork by Dr. David Malangi, which is otherwise known as David Malangi, and entered the competition for the design of the Australian $1 note. And Argo from Arnhem Land didn't even know about it. So he won the competition, this guy, this graphic designer, and the note is produced in 1966 when Dr. David Malangi is still not a citizen of Australia. And so a court case ensued. So this is what equally excited me because it's one of the first, if not the first, legal case involving an Aboriginal artist and an artwork. I won't bang on about it too much because people can do their own research, but you can just see where your head starts to explode on this. Because what ultimately transpired is quite cute and a juicy little story. David Malangi won the court case. So he was awarded pretty much what he wanted, and that was a pile of cash. But in his demands were an aluminium dinghy, a boat with a motor, and a briefcase. And supposedly, Dr. David Malangi became the big boss man of Arnhem Land, and the first boss man because he had a briefcase to carry the money.
That's fantastic. So he got $1,000 and so converted or, updated for 2025, about $15,000 today for the government essentially stealing his artwork. I think it's worth pointing out what's on the other side of his artwork on that $1 banknote.
Well, it's Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Yes.
The beautiful, the note is a beautiful historic account of what has happened here since the inception of the colony, particularly since Federation, 1901. What a remarkable metaphor for what has transpired. Now, let's look at another thing that's not discussed in the Wikipedia blurb about this case, and that is who owns that original artwork and how much would that artwork be worth today? The one that features the figures that is on the $1 note. It would surely be up there with fetching the most gain in the secondary market if it went to auction. And once again, there's somewhat draconian copyright laws in Australia would see that survivors, descendants of Dr. David Malangi and that family would probably receive 2% of the sales if that work went to auction.
I do want to say the dissonance between Elizabeth on one side and Aboriginal art on the other. In 1964, I think, is when this was chosen before it went to print in 66. Again, white-only policy, still full in effect, and Aboriginal people aren't even people, as you say, flora and fauna. But that the country, its white government, to be clear, found value in the Aboriginal identity enough to put it on a banknote, but not recognize the culture that it was stealing as remotely valuable. No presence in schools, no presence anywhere. Aboriginal people living primarily on missions, as wards of the state in some way. It's an incredibly mind-boggling decision to be that racist and also embracing of the colonial identity, the conquest in some way. I'm not even sure how to interpret this decision. What do you make of that decision in 64?
It's confounding because as we speak, there's a revision, there's a new design for Australian $5 note underway. And so the expression of interest was put out there once again to the Aboriginal fraternity. However, let me just add this one for the viewers. As long as I've been making art, which is near 30 years, 3 decades, the battle that contemporary modern Aboriginal artists like myself have is against the stereotypical Aboriginal art, which ends up featuring on what is branded globally. And so that is either the bark paintings from the Yolngu Nation from Northeast Arnhem Land, or the dot paintings from the Western Desert. And so these are typically what have been projected to the rest of the world for a good part of 50 years plus. And so it makes it very hard for a groundbreaking modern First Nations artist who's exceptional in their medium to streak ahead with international acceptance and their international prowess. That's a problem that keeps surfacing, and something that I try and advocate to the kids as well, particularly the young First Nations artists here. We must try our darndest to try and find out our peoples of origin and what kind of artworks we design. But sadly, back to what I said earlier about the cottage lane industry of art, which is still life arrangements on a table, painted, sadly become consistent with particularly the tourist industry here. So when international visitors visit Australia, when they are disembarking their plane, they will walk out into Sydney International Airport, and the first images of Aboriginal art you will see of tribal Aboriginal people from the middle of Australia painting, making designs in sand or painting dot-style paintings. And those are also transposed onto small little artworks and trinkets and printed paraphernalia like tea towels or T-shirts. And this is what you get when you first visit this continent, even though where the airport is positioned in Australia had a very different type of Aboriginal people and was the site of the first landing of the British. So we can't help what we're hit with via promotional engagements, but there is too much to be learned about art from a First Nation perspective here to be able to appreciate the diversity and what exists for modern Aboriginal artists today.
The adoption by the white culture here of Aboriginal symbology and culture, the monetization of it, even just the this actually brings it back to the banknote. I did a deep dive and found that for David Malangi to be paid, he essentially had to get permission of his custodian because because he wasn't a person yet, and missions at this point were making so much money off of Aboriginal art, basically selling to Western peoples, whether tourists or just white Australians who wanted a piece of art in their homes to make them feel better about whatever it is. But there was a whole industry built around paying Aboriginal people pennies, essentially, to create art and sell this idea of the Aboriginal culture to people around the globe. It's horrifying.
For sure. So there is an elite market, I call it a chook lotto, for the most collectible Aboriginal artworks here. And so I made an artwork about it, which I entered in an art prize here coinciding with the Archibald this year, but I wasn't selected. And I won't go into what I think of why that was. But the artwork spoke of, it was a text-based artwork, and it featured in the ilk of the famous T-shirt, London, Paris, New York, Tokyo, and then people put their own town in that T-shirt. But my version listed the top 5 selling artists in auction in Australia. And so that's Albert Namatjira, Rover Thomas, Emily Kamawari, Clifford Blossom Jappaljari, and then me. I put myself beneath right at the bottom. Their names are in metallic gold, so they've achieved the top prizes. In secondary sales in the auction market here in Australia, and may have left the shores those artworks. What I was trying to say in that artwork was that, as the famous shortest poem iterated by Muhammad Ali, me, we. I'm trying to say that when will we see, how long will it take to see another name added to that list of the top selling auction prices achieved in Aboriginal art sales? And how long even further will that be to become a contemporary Aboriginal artist? Because all of a sudden, all the aforementioned artists are tribal Aboriginal artists and befit the stereotype of what the art world likes to see culturally coming off these shores.
How do you feel about how you would be labeled? Are you an Aboriginal artist? Are you an Australian artist who's also Aboriginal? How do you want to be seen in that regard?
Tracy Moffat, our most famous living First Nations artist today. You'll be familiar with Tracy Moffat, no doubt, with her amazing photo video works and also some iconic short films that she's made. Anyway, she was asked also, but she was the first Aboriginal artist to profess that she was not an Aboriginal artist. First and foremost, she was an artist. And maybe that's what helped her pave her way in New York so grandly. But nonetheless, I would always identify as being an Aboriginal artist, and always have, because of what I speak about. And perhaps, unfortuitously, that has, by and large, pigeonholed me as the establishment here seems to love so dearly, is pigeonholing. If that has, it's both sad and also honourable that maybe I was able to forge a career by unforeseeingly being pigeonholed as an Aboriginal artist.
Well, so I think we should probably circle back to David Malangi for the way out here. You emailed about some of what this story taught you when you were just starting out as an artist. I'm curious what happened to him and his art taught you, how it impacted you as you described.
Well, we can fast forwarding now. Every artist, exhibiting artist today in Australia, and thank another commendation of the government, is that we have not only arts law, which represents artists, and you can just phone up and get advice on anything that might be troubling you. And furthermore, some decade or plus ago, I was commissioned to design the branding for what became Artists in the Black. And that was specifically representing Aboriginal artists, First Nations artists in Australia. And so I had to design a poster with a cartoon style narrative, particularly that enabled non-English speaking First Nations people in remote communities to get an understanding that they should join arts law, because if somebody comes and carpetbags your work, which is a term for the obscene practice of white people enslaving tribal Aboriginal people from certain communities to make a body of artworks for which they sell and feed the artists in what they want, which is often fast food and beer. And those practices still take place, might be a little bit under the rug nowadays, but they still take place. So my poster was designed to say, listen, if you join arts law, they can help you if you get shafted by illicit dealers like that. And so that was an honourable thing to be a part of, Artists in the Black. Furthermore, we have the Copyright Agency. And so by being a member of the Copyright Agency of Australia, they follow your sales. And so it's a very thankful thing to be a member of, because now my artworks are starting to reach that secondary market, albeit for petty prices. But the fact is that when that artist sells after 2 auctions in the auction market, you receive 5% royalties of the sale of the work.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very important thing.
And this is all traces back to David Malangi here.
That's right. So what was fascinating was that in 1966, so over 50 years ago, he was pretty much the grandfather of copyright infringement.
This has been a fantastic conversation, Blak. Start to finish, thank you for teaching me so much about art history in this country.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and I really am thankful to have this voice with you, and I really hope that your listeners have the opportunity to expand their knowledge on where we are as First Nations people in the modern era.
As for you listening, thank you again for your support of 5 a.m. Story Talk. If you have any questions about this bonus episode, make your way to the comments section with them and I'll do my best to answer you. If you enjoyed what you just listened to, slapping a 5-star rating on this podcast, maybe a thumbs up, would go a long way to helping it grow. That's it for now. I'll see you next time, my friends.